Alright, so here we go. It's an old Dell Dimension V400C machine. It has a floppy drive, which is important, and we'll see that in a moment. It also had a CD-ROM drive in there, actually quite an advanced one, 52 times. Now, turning this around, you can actually, let me make sure you can see the interiors here. You'll see the ISA slots down here, and then the PCI slots. So this is a board that's, pretty typical for the age of the machine, as they were transitioning from ISA over to PCI and then eventually to PCI Express. You see generally the boards will start having 3 of these and 1 of those, and then slowly this will go down to 1, and then eventually, as the custom demand for supporting old extensibility cards go down, they eventually get rid of it and they transition completely over. You can see the memory is over here. This is a Celeron card, and you can sort of see that because it's plugged vertically into the machine, which is the same form factor as the old Pentium 1s, I think, came in that, it's just escaping me what it is right now. And then eventually they moved back to the sockets flat down. You can see some of the memory here. There's 2 boards that are the same and then 1 that's different. So these 2 are going to be a 128 meg all up, and then I think this one will be a 32 meg sort of size board. There's you might be able to see it just in here, there's a line coming from the CD-ROM drive, which is up at the top here. That's a Turtle Beach networking card. And then this guy here is a wireless networking card. It's from a D-Link networking, I think it's wireless G card. So somebody over time has gone in and added stuff to the machine, because I don't believe the wireless G standard existed at the time that this board came out. Over here we can see floppy drive, which is good, and we have 2 drives here, and so this will be the original drive down here in the front, and this is a 4 gig drive, and this drive here is a 120 gig drive. And now this is an LBA drive, and that will create some issues for us as we install the OS, because Win98, which I'm going to put on this machine, didn't have native support for LBA, and so when you install it and use FDisk, what you're going to run into is issues with the translation from logical block addressing into the old CHT, cylinder head track model, and that's usually handled by the BIOS and surface back up to DOS, and we'll see that as we go through. This era of things, and this is challenging. Is it's I worked on Win95 on Chicago way back when, and then I came back to work on Visual Studio just as we were releasing Win98. So this is working my memory here as to what went on. But the order that you install things and set stuff up, I seem to remember from the Win98 era, was very, very important. I'm sort of getting post-traumatic stress flashbacks into dealing with the orders and crappy Toshiba firmware back in the late 90s. Anyway, what we'll go through is we'll go through the process of installing this, and we can see it. So the first thing we want to do is put the card in. And so I'm going to use the second slot up to do that. Now, the reason I'm using the second slot up is just to give me a little bit more space when it comes to connecting to here. If you look at a HPIB cable, we're going to have that plugged in there. So we don't want to hit anything that's on the side, the plastic, because it's quite a large connector on the plastic on the side of the unit or so on. So let's drop this card in. Yep. That's a little tight, but there we go. So we're in there. And it's generally good form to always screw these cards back in, because what will happen if you push these in and out is that you basically will stress the connectors on the little fingers, and eventually they become loose. And then you start getting transient errors, which are very, very hard to track down. So just grab the little screws, you can buy them, they're anywhere the same. I don't think they've changed in 25 years. Anyway, we've got the card in there now, so let's set up to turn it on, and then we'll start installing some software. Alright, so here's what we're going to install. An actual, my actual original copy. I got this back in 98 or in 99 when we released second edition, and the boot disk. So I've kept these, managed to keep these together for what, 18 years now, which is surprising. Anyway, let's go and stick this guy in, and then we'll turn the system on. Now, what I'm actually using here is I'm using just a little Logitech keyboard with a USB based transceiver plugged back in. Even machines of this vintage had the BIOS settings in there to enable you to support for keyboard USB types directly in, and it will do the native translation of the USB keyboard to look like a PS2 keyboard for DOS. Now that we've got the partition set up, the installer should work correctly now. It will detect that the C partition is there, and then it will format that. Because we don't have a D partition set up, it won't try and format that, and it won't get confused about the CD-ROM drive not being in D. You can see that it's just a standard IDE drive. It's been picked up by the Oak driver. I think this driver picks up virtually every IDE CD-ROM made since the late 90s. And then you can see the vast array of Adaptec drivers, because they were, for quite some time, the market leader of CD-ROM drives, where they would have dedicated CD-ROM driver cards and connections into the CD-ROM drive. Anyway, now that we're here, we can tell it to not configure, because we don't want it to create a partition on the next drive, but we do want it to format. And so now it will go and format that 4 gig drive for us. Okay, so now we're finished formatting, or at least almost finished. There we go. We'll now copy over the base Win98 files, and then we'll boot into the graphical installer. Okay, so now we'll continue. So bring back a bunch of memories. I did this a lot. Okay, so now I'm going to put in my product key. I'm going to stop the video here because the last time I did this, when I was editing, I forgot to cut it out. So if I don't record it, you can't see it. Okay, so we're ready to install. We'll send it to the C drive. We did a lot of steps in here that I don't think were necessary. Well, I'm not sure why we did a bunch of stuff, you know. Clearly we must have had some idea or some requirement. Setup is always very, very difficult. It's a hard job to be a setup engineer and get reliable setups based on all the different possible configurations that are out there. Okay, we'll install the most common. Now I want to call this TG HPIB. We do want work group, and I'm going to call this the 82341C HPIB machine. So, okay, that seems all good. Okay, now we've got to create a startup disk. Okay, this is annoying. So we used to have hundreds of these disks laying around, you know, and so I'm not sure why. I never actually ever used a startup disk to run diagnostics or to save a machine. But the reason we ended up with hundreds of these laying around is you'd be installing and you'd pick up a disk that you had used before and you'd put it in, and then at that point we'd check and we go, oh no, this is a startup disk, we can't format this for you. And so you'd have to go find another one, and eventually you'd end up with a pile of 3.5-inch floppies laying around that were all startup disks, because you'd always forget to reformat them prior to starting an install. Okay, now that the startup disk is finished, we'll eject that. I'll click OK. And we'll begin copying the files. So I don't think there's anything more interesting in the process here until we get to the reboot cycle. So we'll probably cut from here, and then we'll jump once our file copy process hits 100, and we're ready at the next section. This used to be very common if you've installed a lot of Microsoft software of that era. Our marketing guys would create text that would go into a panel, and so during setup we'd be telling you either about the software, or we'd be pushing positive messages about other bits and pieces and so on. Fortunately, we've gotten away from that, and we just think now setup is done to be as quickly as possible. If you look at Visual Studio 2017, they spent an amazing amount of effort in this release to make setup much faster than what it was previously, and you can see that even though it's laying down gigabytes of stuff, it's still much quicker than 2015 and update 3 and the service pack and so on. Anyway, we'll be back when this hits 100. Okay, so now we set the clock. So the clock's all set correctly, and then it's going to go through and do its last little bits of setup, and then restart. So we'll come back then. So here we are with the Win98 second edition booted up. To record using my HD60S, I needed to get it to output an actual HD format, like 1280 by 720p. Unfortunately, the card, the video card, which is the ATI Rage Pro Turbo that's integrated on the motherboard, isn't capable of doing that. So I had to duck out to a PC recycler and buy some old video cards. And I found an NVIDIA one that worked and was able to get the drivers, so here we are. Now the first dialog here is really to give you your domain credentials or so on, but because I don't run a domain, or I don't have anything that's doing password protected sharing around here, don't really need to log in. So here we can see the basic desktop, and this is exactly as it comes out. The only thing I've done to the machine is actually to install the video driver for the NVIDIA card and then set it to 720p so that I can record this. So what I wanted to do was to go and drop some files on here and do some work. And the reason I got this machine, and we're going through the process of setting this up, is that I bought, and you can see over here, I bought these disks that are actually from Agilent, and they're various technology and performance testing example programs and so on, for some of the hardware I've got. This is for my 8563 spectrum analyzer. This is for a 54622 oscilloscope that I have, and this is for my 8714C network analyzer. Now, some of these disks, and actually this one here, were originally written and created for a Series 200, Series 300 HPUX machine that Hewlett-Packard sold way back in the day. And they're formatted with a format called LIF. And so I need to pull the stuff off these disks And to do that, I need to use some utilities, like lif util, which is provided by Hewlett-Packard, which drives a DOS, or drives a PC disk controller such that you can read the sector format on the disk. Now, this was really the key reason that I needed the PC, because it takes advantage of the registers and the hardware configuration in the disk drive controller itself. And so you can't use these utilities with a USB floppy drive on a modern Windows 10 or Windows 8 machine. In fact, I don't even think they work on a modern Windows XP machine, or a Windows XP machine. You have to have an actual physical floppy drive controller. So I had to go get the machine to do that. So the first thing that I want to go do is I'm going to go and install and update a few things. Let's connect to the, I think I have the network plugged in. I want to connect to the internet through my LAN. I can already connect through a LAN, so we do that. And we do that. And I don't want to set up an email account. So there we go. Now when we do this, it'll bring up the awesome Internet Explorer 5.5, I think it is. Yes, we're going to get problems because you don't understand the actual code. So if we have a look, yep, Internet Explorer 5. So here we have that. Now, you really can't get a lot of websites. You just know, if I try and go to, for example, if I try and go to the Keysight website, it just really can't process it because the formats have changed, the JavaScript engines, the code is updated. It just simply won't work. So I got to get to something that has a semblance of modern access to it. And so to do that, I'm going to install Internet Explorer 6. Now, yes, I understand that Internet Explorer 6 is a bug-ridden mess, but on a Win98 machine, you shouldn't be surfing the web randomly anyway. And you really are just using it if I had to get to a site. So we'll go and install this, and then once it's done, we'll need to reboot the machine, and we can see that IE6 will be installed. And I don't know if the Keysight website will actually render, so we'll have to give that a try. Anyway, we'll be back in a moment. Okay, so let's give it a go and see if we can hit the Keysight website now. So, if we go to about, we now have 6 running. So let's go and see what happens when we go to Keysight. Again, I'm not expecting much because the world has well moved on from this technology. And at least we didn't get the errors. Oh, well, what do you know? We do get some page concept rendering. Clearly not how the designer wanted to have it come out, but at least we can see that Google Ads and DoubleClick don't work with the JavaScript. Anyway, let's get rid of that. But that might be enough if I needed to download anything specific from the Keysight side. So I can get rid of a bunch of this stuff. Let's delete that. Let's delete this stuff here, because I don't need those. Yes, we want to get rid of all that. All right, so now the next thing that I want to install is Adobe Reader, because some of the apps and so on will have PDF. There's no native PDF support in Win98SE. Much like it's hard to find IE6, in the end I didn't actually find it anywhere on the internet, and I had to just go to our Boneyard and pull it out of our Boneyard servers so that I could get access to it. So there we go, we have that installed. So now let's go and install a couple of tools that I think everyone should have, and the first of these is going to be PKZip. I had a license for WinZip somewhere, but I can't for the life of me find where that license went. And I don't use the features of a current WinZip, so there's not really a lot of point in paying for it. So I just don't use it. I do have a license for WinImage though, and WinImage is a cool tool that you should use. So let's the first thing that we're going to go do is we're going to go and start a let's go and start a command file. So we'll go here, we'll go programs, MS-DOS prompt. Nice, let's just expand that a little bit. Let's see how big we can make it. Excellent. So where was it? Windows, CD, desktop / files. There we go. All right, so what I want to do is I want to make a directory called PKZip. I'm going to copy pk204g.exe over to c:\PKZip. I wonder if DOS key is still available. There we go. All right, so let's go del c:\lifutil. Let's go rd lifutil. Let's go md / lifutil. And let's go copy lif star c:\lifutil. This Logitech keyboard has those keys all scrunched together, so I'm missing a lot of keys here at the moment. The DOS key gives you the ability to use up and down arrows to basically go through your command history. So it's a nice little util. We introduced that in MS-DOS 5.0, I think. Or 6.0. Anyway, I always add it when I install a DOS machine because it gives you that keyboard buffer. This will not carry over because I did it in an MS-DOS prompt, so when I come back to Windows next time I open up a DOS prompt, it'll have forgotten this. But let's do a quick look. Okay, so we've got lift arc, we've created PKZip. Let's do teledisk and a image disk, and we'll take a look at what those are because they're related to these files here that have the TD0 extension. So copy tel *** c:\teledisk, and then copy imd *** c:\image disk. Okay, so the last thing that now that I've got that, let's go up to PK. Let's go up to CD c:\PKZip here. So we'll do PK204G. All right. So now that we've got that done, we can go over to lifutil. Okay. So we'll go lif arc. And now we have our lifutil. Let's go over to the /teledisk. Now, teledisk doesn't need to be expanded, I think. I think it's just, yeah. So, and now let's go to image disk. Okay, so we're going to /. I'll add these to the path a little bit later, but unzip. -D, I want it to recreate the disk if there's any 118.zip. Okay, so there we have our image disk utilities. So we should now be all ready, and I can start doing some of the first stuff that I wanted to do. So let's go over to lifutil. Oh, in fact. Okay, and let's run lifutil.
So now what you're seeing here is this is a set of utilities. So I'm going to take that first disk. In fact, let me exit here for a moment. Let me put that 8560E performance disk in, and let's just try and do a, read it. And we should get an error telling it that the disk isn't readable, right? So we'll abort. So now if we do lift util, we can come in and do a catalog, and we'll say, show me what's on drive A. It's the entire disk, and we'll output it to the CRT. So we now hit F5. Okay, so now we see the, that there's this verify_6 XE, and it's basically a binary HP basic file. So let's go in and, we're done with this, so we can go back to the main menu. So you saw that I couldn't get access to the disk when I tried to do a DIR. What I can do is I can copy that item. So let's just go and copy the disk. And now what we'll do, what the lift util will do, is actually drive the disk controller directly to understand the sector boundaries and so on, to actually copy all the data off the disk and stick it into the directory there. Okay, so we're now, let's exit out of that. Let's go back to the main menu, and we can leave. And if we do a directory here, you'll see verify6 has been copied off the lift disk. So now I can go and load that into HP Basic and start using it to drive performance testing of my 8563E spectrum analyzer. All right, so the next thing that we wanted to look at, what I wanted to look at was the teledisk utility. So let's go to /teledisk. And teledisk is an old utility for capturing drive images or disk images, and it works to capture disk images from those LIF formatted disks. So what I'm going to go do is I'm going to copy C:\Windows /user, desktop, sorry, desktop /files /star.td0. Okay, and what we're going to go look at is BAS5 ManX, because that's a set of basic HP Basic 5 version 5 examples from the manual, and it has some great examples on how to use HP Basic to do things like create graphic UI, to create menus and so on. And I wanted to look at those examples because I'd like to play around a bit with HP Basic and build some HPIB automation software for my gear. So now that we have that, let's go to teledisk, and you'll see that we have a ability to copy a disk to file or file to disk. So what I can do here is, actually let's just start copy the disk to file, and we're going to copy the disk that the 8563 software was on, and so we'll call it the 8560E perf.td0. Okay. And 60E/EC performance verification software. Okay. And you can see now that it's determined that it's a double-sided high-density disk, that the sector size is 512 bytes. And so now it will go through and read all of those tracks and write me an actual image of that disk in LIF format. And if we take a look, we can see that we have a TDO file, a TD0 file that was written. Now, part of the problem with Teledisk is that it is a proprietary format, and while this is sort of abandonware as far as I'm aware, it's not, it really isn't available for update or use or any form of modernization. So that's where image disk comes in. Now, image disk is, let me type readme.txt and we'll pipe it to more. Let's see if this has, image disk is basically a program that lets you do that real. And it was created by Dave Dunfield. And so it's really what people should be using now to go and create images that reflect these old, LIF disks from HPUX days. So let's get out of that, and we'll see that we have this stuff here, and this a TDO2 to IMD. So let's copy from C:\teledisk / the 8* TD0. And now if we do TD0 to IMD, we can do TD0 to IMD, and then we'll tell it the 8560E perf.td0. And that should, okay. And so now if we look, we now have an IMD file that's slightly different. And so now we should be able to do, let's have a look at what IMD has. Okay. Okay, so, so now I could write that file. I can convert that TD0 file over. Alternatively, what I can actually do is just go and read the file directly in and get access to it. But what I'm going to go do is instead, hang on, because one of the things you do need to do is you need to get some information about the disk. So we want IMDA. So what we want to do is IMDA, and then we want 8560E perf.imd. Actually, it's eper.imd. That's 8.3 character limit. Right. So what it's telling me is it's double step off, high density. So let's go and actually write a disk from file. Oh, single settings, double step. I think it was double step off, wasn't it? Gotta go back. Double step off, right. Okay. And then we're going to write disk from file. We're going to select that guy. I'm going to take my disk out. I'm going to stick a blank disk in there, and then press enter to proceed. All right, so now I have a physical floppy disk copy of my 83, 85, 63 performance software. So now, what I've shown, if we go up and we take a quick look, we've looked at LiftUtil, TeleDisk, Image Disk, and we have PKZip in there. So now, let's go back up again and keep going with the next set of install parts, because what I'm going to do is drop in the Intel chipset driver software. Now you want to install this because this is going to add support for all of the hardware that's in the 440BX chipset. I think it was a 440BX chipset. And so this will turn on all the USB ports and make some of the software run a little bit faster. So what we'll go do is we'll go reboot the machine, and we'll catch it when it gets back into Windows. Okay, so we've now rebooted. So let's click through here, and here you can now see the driver database is coming in. We've installed a bunch of drivers, so now Windows will go through and detect all the drivers from that database, and we'll start plugging in all of the various custom drivers. Now, the basic architecture of this stuff will work, and you'll be successful at using your machine, but the custom drivers enable optimizations for the actual underlying hardware, as well as some extensions to the OS, so that you get better performance once you install the chipset drivers. So you really should do that on any machine, even if you've just bought it and Windows supports it, because you do get some additional performance benefits and so on out of it. So let's go back into our files and take a look at the next utility that I think everyone should have on their machine. Which is WinImage. This is a great utility. I'm not going to register it because I'll forget to edit it out, and then everyone will see my registration code. So now we're installed, and when we run WinImage, what I can do is I can take, say, the 54622 disk, and if we go and take a look here, you can see that I can see the contents of the disk. So let me just pause for a moment, and I'll be back shortly. So you can see this. So I can just copy this in and out, but it'd be great if I could just get a complete image of the disk. And so with WinImage, that's exactly what you can do. You can tell it to go look at the drive, and it will extract a single image file that you can then save as a binary representation of that actual disk. So this way, what I can do is keep exact copies of both the LIF formatted as well as the DOS formatted drives that I have here. Okay, so now I can save that, and I could stick it, let's just go stick it, well, let's put it in my documents, and we'll call that 54622 example. And so if we have a look at my documents file, you'll see that I now have a compressed image folder. Now these things, great things with this is you can save these images and actually just use them directly in virtual machines. So WinImage is really a valuable product. Now I've had a license for WinImage since geez, I think like 93, the pre-compu, in the CompuServe days, back when, you used to have to dial up to CompuServe, and, we would do a bunch of our developer relations work would be done over the CompuServe forums and things like that. So, that's better part of what, 25 odd years or so. Really valuable, worthwhile utility. Okay, so now let's look at the next thing. Excuse me. So now we're done with our utilities. I think the next thing that we need to install is going to be the HP or the Keysight I/O libraries now. Now, I'm going to install the M version. If you went to the website and looked actually at the versions and previous versions of the I/O library suite, if you go right down the bottom of that, you'll see that I believe the M version was the last version that supported Win98 and the 82341C card. So let's run that. Okay, we'll just go through and just install everything. We'll do a full installation. You might have noticed some of the PDF files getting installed there. Okay. So let's run IO config, I think, is what we want to do. And that should help us find the card. So there we have an ISA GPU. So let's configure that. Okay. Okay, so now let me just, I can't remember if I didn't plug in the HPIB cable. So let's go and do that. And I need to tighten the little nuts on it. Turn on my two devices, and then we should see once they boot up. Here you'll see I've got two drivers here, 23 and 28. So the 23 will be my 53131A frequency counter. The 28 will be my Keithley 2015 THD. And so I should be able to enter a IDN question mark, star, and that should go ask, so Sippy, oh here, I could have actually just simply typed that in, there you go. And we could do the same thing with, so we're now up and running and talking. So that's the drivers there for M. Now there's 3 patches that are available for that as well. So let's just go and run the patches. Now the patches are all, they are not what they call cumulative patches. So each one is a separate patch. So we'll run patch 1. Okay. We'll run patch 2, and this is using the old school patching utility, RT patch. And then we'll run patch 3. Okay, so let's start the process again. I realized what I'd done wrong here. I'm going to go configure this, and what's happening here is it is automatically going to create for me a TCP/IP connection that supports that. So if we do there, you'll see that the LAN there. I must not have noticed it previously, and when I clicked on auto config, it added everything, and then I deleted it, and that broke this guy here. So if we do an edit now on this, I can now go and auto add all of the devices if I wish, and you'll see that it's identified. Because this is a remote controller, it basically identifies, I believe, all of the devices, and you can go and add all of them, and then they'll all be present. Now there's no actual device connected to it, so what we're going to go do is we're actually just going to remove all of these devices. Let's see if I cancel. If I come back in, I'm just going to add a device. We'll call it 10. And now if I come back, and then I come back over here and I go Visa Assistant, it's going to come in. I'm going to be able to do 10. If I come over here, I can Skippy and I can do IDN, and there you see now that I'm getting my actual device. So I can connect both to the physical 82341 drive card here, as well as my network adapter. So that gets me all of my machines that are in the rack. Okay, there's now one last thing that I would like to install, and that is going to be HP Basic. Oh, actually no, there is one other thing that I'd like to show you, and that's something that I alluded to earlier, and that was FDisk. And so when we go in and look at FDisk, if we have a look at the partition information, you'll see that I'm on the 4 gig partition there. If we now look and see what other disks here, you'll see that there is, the 110, 120 gigabyte drive is being identified incorrectly. It's coming in as a 48 gigabyte drive. That's because this version of FDisk had an issue with not being able to, it had a problem with I think an unsigned 16-bit or unsigned integer that was rolling over, and so it was breaking FDisk. So there is a KB article, and if you go to search for KB263044, that will get you the update that fixes the problem in FDisk. So if we go and install that, we now have to restart the drive, restart the machine, but we'll go and see the change that's made. So let's restart, and we'll take a look at FDisk again. Okay, so now that we've rebooted, I should be able to run FDisk again. And now what you'll see is 11447, and that should be actually 6 characters long, but the bug fixed the internal problem with FDisk because they didn't fix the UI issue here. So I can change to fixed disk 2. We can take a look at there's no partitions there, so let's go and create a partition, and we'll create And now we'll go and check the partition and verify the drive integrity, and then we'll actually go and create the underlying partition. So we'll let that run, and then the machine will need to reboot because the partitions need to be written once the reboot's done, and then we'll be able to see the drive being available. Okay, really need to get a better microphone to record this. I've been playing around with it. Anyway, again, don't need to sign on. Now if I open up my computer and try to go to the D drive, you'll see it's not accessible. So now what I can do is I can come in and format that. And we'll need to do a full format. Yep. And you can see that it's 114470. So that was that extra digit that was missing in FDisk because we fixed the issue with the actual sector and disk size being an unsigned int and overflowing, but we didn't fix the UI, unfortunately. Anyway, it's going to go away and it'll create that that drive for us. So now the last thing that I need to do is to install HP Basic, and we can take a quick look at what HP Basic looks like. Okay, so now that we're done here, we'll run scan disk. Oh, 1D. And let's make sure that's all good. Okay, that's great. So let's close that. And now we'll go and install HP Basic. Actually, before we do that, let's install iBasic. Now, this is Instrument Basic. This is an old Win16 app that was the first Instrument Basic, the first Basic or HP Basic for Windows product. And what you're seeing here is the install coming back and saying there's no HPIB interface cards. Now there actually is, because you saw that I put a HP 82341C in there, but because I don't have the DOS drivers installed, it doesn't pick that up, and can't see that it exists. And I haven't been able to find DOS drivers anywhere. But I wanted to put this on here, first of all, to show you what it sort of looked like previously. And if we open it up, you'll see this is basically the experience. You know, we had, you know, we could go in and assign at DMM, comma, I think it's actually semicolon 722, you know, no, comma, no, all right, so I'm forgetting what the syntax is. All right, let's take a look at the help. Keyword dictionary, we want to assign. Oh, two, okay. In the later versions, it's just, I think, a comma, but 2722, you know, and then we could do output at DMM, semicolon, and, you know, we could say IDN, and then we could go enter, at DMM, comma, A dollars, oh, semicolon, A dollars. Oh, no. Enter at DMM, comma, A dollars. Let's go have a look at help at this again. Keyword dictionary, and we want enter. Oh, I'm guessing that maybe the dollars is the problem. Oh no, hang on. Enter at. Okay. Enter at DMM. Oh, no, it's because I capitalized. Enter at DMM, semicolon, A dollars. There we go. It's a little bit, it's hard to think back to the days before a lot of IDEs and so on where, syntax was correct. There was a lot of like really sort of random restrictions on things because that's the way people developed it, and then I could do print A dollars and end, and now that little piece of code there basically would go out and look for the HPIB device that has ID 22 on the SQL 7 interface. Then it'll send the ID query, which is a non-skippy call. Now 722 is 22 is typically the default for the 3458A. So this would send my 3458A a request to say give it its ID. Now if you were using Skippy, it'd be IDN. And then the next thing it does is go and get that value, stick it into the string, and then print it. And then I should really have defined the string and everything. But that's basically the sort of the experience there. And then if you clicked on run here, what it would do is it would then go and run that and push it out the HPIB card. The reason that I'm still looking at some point when I find the drivers for this, I'll go back and put Win16 on it. Well, I'll try getting the drivers to work with Win98, but I'll go put Win16 on here, and then we'll give. Then I'll have give this a try and see how it goes. Now I wanted this because the language does change over time, and so I have some sample code and so on that just is built for Instrument Basic, and so I can go and use it directly here and then see how it's running and then convert it into the later version. Anyway, let's go install HPIB Basic and see how that looks. Okay. Nope, files. And then we're going to go in here and install HPIB Basic, and now we're going to run it. Now this is a more modern HPIB Basic. This is actually the that iBasic was the one that HP developed. This one is, I think, the one that was the clone that Transera implemented, and HP then went back to Transera and actually licensed this and retired their line of Basic that was developed. So what I'm going to do is stop the recording, and then we will. I'll put my serial number in. I'll move to the next item, and then we'll continue with the install. Okay. I should have a better way of doing this so that I may probably take notes and say like I need to remove my serial number and stuff because I missed it the last time, and I think the DEFPOM pointed out that I had still left it in there, so I had to pull the video and recut it. Anyway, you can pick two types of versions here, and the enterprise version has a GUI interface, and it's better. It's a more modern version, but the legacy version is really the one that's more similar to the HPIB Basics that ran on the HP UX machines on the Series 200, Series 300, 400, HP 9000 Unix boxes. So I'm going to select legacy version. We'll say typical, and then we're going to have go in and run that. So there we go. So now, well, it's not quite finished installing yet. I'm not going to restart my computer. I don't believe I really need to per se. So let's go and shut it down, and let's run HP Basic for Windows. And there you can see this is actually the Transera one. And this is the user experience that you get. It's very much a console type. It's that, the aim was to be as true to the HPUX implementation as it could be. So we can have a look and see what drivers are loaded. So right now we don't actually have any drivers, so I can't go and connect with anything. So I need to load something. So I'm going to well, there you go. So it was just the dev was in lowercase. So now if we do a list bin, we'll see that the HPIB SQL driver is loaded. So we can do, we'll go and do a scratch. So now if we do a list, there's nothing there. So I can do 10 assign at counter to 723. I think my counter is 723. If we do list. Okay, so let's edit 20. Okay, so now we're ready to go in. So I think my counter is 723. We'll see what it comes up with anyway. So now I'm going to output. So the counter is a 53131A. So we're going to do output, and so it's SQL, so we can do star IDN question mark, and then we can do enter at counter $8, and then we can do print $8, and then we can do end. Okay, so now if we do function F3, so you'll see that started getting the thing. So now if we list, you'll see that I didn't assign. So if we come in and do, say, line 9, and we go dim $8 bracket 128, I think that's what you have to do. Okay, and now if we run it, you'll see that I now get the full string out of there. So wanted to grab this environment because, again, this is very close to the HPUX stuff, and I have some of these programs that I want to run. And in fact, I run a bunch of the sample programs and example stuff. The one thing I wanted to do was to run some operational verification software and some adjustment software for my 8340B and for my 8563E. And unfortunately, they're saved, now that I pulled them off the disks, I've discovered that they're actually saved in binary format. And the binary format between HP Basic for Windows and HP Basic for HPUX is different. And you have to transition them from one to another via saving via ASCII. And unfortunately, somebody's gone in and secured the program, so I can't actually do that. So I'm trying to, looking out in the community, see if I can find somebody that can move that. And I've had some people offer to help, but we seem to be struggling trying to make that change. So hopefully I'll be able to get that unlocked and get it on here, and then we can take a look at it. What I am going to go do is come back and do a little bit of an example using HP Basic and programming the HP 54622A digital oscilloscope, and we'll show getting some screenshots and that back using HP Basic. So that'll be a later video, and we'll probably have to wait until I get back from the tour that we're actually on. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll catch you again later.